the ultimate game changer. That is what Beryl consultants say about autonomous trucks in their latest study. In this technology, they see the potential to completely rethink transportation industry, because autonomous trucks can not only help solving the problem of driver shortage, but also save a lot of money. You know, up to 40% of the total cost of ownership of a truck belongs to the salary of the driver. So that's more than reason enough for us to take a closer look at this technology and the regulations that are needed to bring autonomous trucks to the roads. And we are very pleased to see that you are as interested in this topic as we are. So thank you for joining us in this webcast. My name is Anne-Kathrin Wieser from TRATON Group Communications, and I will guide you through the upcoming discussion with our experts. And I think that's the right point in time to welcome here with me Thomas Doering, our Vice President at TRATON Group for Strategy and Business Opportunities, and in this role you're responsible for autonomous driving within TRATON Group.
Good morning.
And in Brussels we have our colleague Erik Dahlberg, he's from Scania. And you're our expert for legal regulations in Brussels, the Director of Technical Affairs at Scania EU Affairs, and in this role you coordinate Scania's activities, technical activities in the EU institutions and at ACEA. So welcome to Brussels.
Thank you and good morning.
And I'm sure it will be a pleasure to talk with both of you about regulations on the EU market. And after this panel talk we are having in the first time, it's your role to place in your questions as well. Whenever there's a question coming up to your mind, please use the chat function, send it in to me, and I have it here on the iPad, and we can talk about that in the following Q&A session. And just to inform you, this session is recorded, so it will be available afterwards for you as well, if you like to take a second look or maybe a third one or a fourth one, because it's a really interesting topic, I'm sure. So I think it's time to start off, and my first question goes to you, Thomas. Why is autonomous driving such an important business model for the automotive industry and especially for commercial vehicles?
Yeah, and autonomous driving is for various reasons super important for us. One of them is driver shortage. So what we've been facing over the last couple of years, and when talking to our customers and also to big fleet customers, is they're really lacking drivers, and especially drivers for long haulage. So drivers more and more want to be home at their families in the evening, and so especially when they need to be away for several days, this is where all the big fleets have problem attracting the business of a truck driver and getting more drivers. Secondly, it's safety, and that's for us the most important point: road safety. We believe the technology of autonomous driving, so taking the driver out, will improve the road safety significantly over the next couple of years. Just imagine there is, machines don't get tired, for instance, so that's they don't drink alcohol, and you don't have the problem of slow reaction time sometimes, and this is where we believe it's really improving that level of safety over time. A third one is cost. You already mentioned drivers can account up to 40% of the total cost of ownership of operating a truck. And by taking the driver out, we also believe in that market, which is very price sensitive. Also the balance for this transportation will bring the cost down over time. Of course, we need to consider cost for the system which we're going to install in the trucks, but over time that's going to be also a significant cost advantage which we're going to see.
You already mentioned driver shortage, and to take this example from Germany, there we know that around about 30,000 truck drivers retire every year, while only 17,000 are coming new into this job. And these numbers are coming from the German Road Haulage Logistics and Disposal Association. It's BGL, so they know what they talk about, and obviously it is a problem that's more present than ever. How does it affect truck or commercial vehicle industry?
And mentioning the figures, Anna, it's not a German problem, it's really a European problem, and also looking at other regions in the world, we're facing the exact same issue with the driver shortage. As I mentioned, drivers want to be home at their families. So when they are away for several days, and this is where we could easily replace those vehicles by kind of a hub-to-hub technology, having this constantly driving from hubs to hubs, and then just switching the focus of the drivers, not on the driving, because that's also what we get very often as a question. Are you replacing drivers, and what will they be doing in the future? Will they lose their jobs? No, they will be needed, because operation of a truck at the hub will still play an important role, and the tasks of the driver, that will differ in future. But in terms of the driving task, we believe that can be done a lot better by the system.
Yeah, so I think we all agree that there is a lot of potential in autonomous driving, but to push technical innovations forward, I guess it needs some decision also on political and on regulational level. So Erik, to what extent is the legal basis considered important for Scania, if I'm talking to you, but of course also for the other brands in TRATON Group, MAN and Navistar, to set those, let's say, limits and prerequisites, and also gain some security when we invest in research and development?
Well, I would say it's of utmost importance. We have been scaling up the research during a couple of years, and we are now investing quite a lot in research in autonomous driving. Still, there is only one level you can reach until you really need to set down the requirements for the hardware and for the software in your vehicle, and in order to do that, finally you need to have the certainty that this is level enough or the right level to reach the safety targets that is requested from society in order to give the vehicle an approval to run on public roads. So from that perspective, the just recently launched European EU type approval regulation and its forerunner from Germany from last year is very important, because it takes the first steps towards us knowing where we need to reach technically to put the vehicles on larger scale on the roads.
So could you sum it up about what works well at the moment from your perspective, and what has to be changed if we look at this regulatory side?
Well, what works well in Europe is that first of all, some member states were pushing for having a legislation, and Germany was the first member state having it in place, and that the European Commission followed and launched a new legislation. That works well. So that's a very good step forward towards having serious production. Then, of course, this is quite virgin ground also for the legislators. So there are still some parts of the legislation that is not mature enough to have the big numbers of autonomous trucks on the roads. But we are all well aware, the legislators are well aware, and the experts in industry are well aware of what need to be changed. And talking a little bit about that, giving some examples, we still have a limitation in the number of vehicles that can be approved for autonomous driving per year. In the long run or in the medium run, we need to go to unlimited approval, of course. There are also some technical details that need to be refined, and that need to be done in parallel together with the industry, with the knowledge that is developed when we perform our research.
As explained by Erik, thank you, at that point in time, the EU is actively shaping an ecosystem with legislation and regulations to make autonomous vehicles happen. Although, to be honest, the US is technically maybe still a bit ahead. So how does this, from your perspective, affect the competition between truck manufacturers to become maybe number one in the world?
basically in the race of autonomous driving, there is no competition when it comes to legislation, because we're all pursuing the same goal. The ultimate goal is to take a driver out, and it is very positive and positively perceived also in Europe, that, for instance, in the United States, since a very long time, there was pretty good testing conditions. Yeah, and it's a bit of the hen and egg problem. So the legislators always keep coming to the OEMs asking, what is the capabilities, the technical capability of a truck or of a vehicle or of a passenger car? And well, you need to also put demonstrators out to convince people about the technology. So, and when talking about this legislation, we have always these threefold answer which we're looking at. One is clearly the technology. Secondly, it's the regulator. But there's a third aspect, and Erik was also already referring to that, that's a perception in public. So how safe is safe enough? And we need to work on all three of those to actually bring the vehicles on the street. One thing I want to mention, and just take it a step back to 2017, where everybody, and there was a big hype about robotaxis.
Yeah, I remember 2019 there should be the first robotaxi on the street, but to be honest, I haven't seen anyone.
At least not in Europe, but you see quite some vehicles in the US. But that was the big hype, and everybody thought that's the first application which we'll see on public roads. I think that perception has changed over time. And also with legislation, it was in 2019, it was meant that the German legislation took another look at what does it mean for level 4, but this was still based on the experience they had with robotaxis. And it was the truck industry pushing very hard over the last 2 to 3 years in educating not just the industry partners, but also the legislators on what it means to hold commercial freight. And this is why we're, as an OEM, actually very happy that we do have the possibility today to hold commercial freight on public roads in a level 4 vehicle. Because we strongly believe robotaxis, we will see those, no doubt about that. But the first application on public roads will be the so-called hub-to-hub applications. And this is also our strategy, what we're pursuing. And we believe this is really beneficial for the whole society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before I come back to TRATON's mission there, I like the saying that we educated the legislators. And I think that was probably something you did quite a lot, Erik, over the last years. So maybe you can give some more insights on that. So what was the learning curve, or what is the most interesting topics you discuss about?
I think very much goes in line with what Thomas said. To convince the legislator that the hub-to-hub use case is one of the most promising use cases, because it has such a positive business case, and it also a quite low-hanging fruit from a safety perspective. Also, the use case of driving in confined areas, so in mines or in harbors, doing logistic flows or hauling the whatever you mine, is also quite low-hanging fruit and is a good business case. And to connect it to the discussion before, this is typically two of the use cases where also the lack of drivers may be most obvious. So everything is pointing at those two use cases. And that was a learning curve, I would say, for the legislators. But it was confirmed in the final EU type approval legislation, where both confined areas and hub-to-hub, those two use cases are explicitly mentioned as use cases that the legislation is adopted for.
Yeah, thank you. And you at screens, I would like to remind you to send in your questions, because I have none at my iPad so far. So if you have a question to two of our experts, you can already send it in. We will come to that in a few minutes. And before that, Thomas, I would like to know, what is TRATON's mission when looking at the autonomous driving?
I guess as a group, we're pursuing the ultimate mission to make the road safer. That is definitely one of our ultimate goals. And I've mentioned, and also Erik already has touched upon some of the topics, how we are doing that. So we have started in confined areas like mines, especially in Australia with our partner Rio Tinto. That was where we gained great experience and had a great learning curve from the technology perspective. And since 2021, we're also the first ones to deploy vehicles on public roads for hub-to-hub operations in Sweden. Also, when looking at Germany, there's a project called Anita. This is where our colleagues from MAN are very much involved, showcasing in a kind of a harbor environment where it's a container terminal where we shift the containers from the train on the road. And this is done fully autonomously. And then the vehicles who actually bring the containers away are also L4 vehicles with no drivers inside. This is really showcasing what is technically already feasible and also bringing that on the public roads. And again, also educating people where are today limitations, but what is also already feasible. And just imagine your passenger cars, how many assisting systems you have in those vehicles. So this is really serious systems which we are seeing today. And I can tell you there's a lot more technically possible already today. And this is why we're convinced this is the right path. Now, what is our strategy in terms of timing to bring the roads on the vehicles on the roads? We're trying to bring vehicles on public roads in big scale around 2030. It is a long path, so you might think it's far out. For us as a manufacturer, this is basically today. So, and we're learning day by day. This is an iterative process, and we're very happy that we already have the experience and the experts in our group to pursue that goal.
So if we look at 2030, we are probably talking not about combustion engines anymore, but about e-trucks. So how does this go together? Yeah. Maybe also TCO-wise?
No, you're taking one of the most important points. Yes, you're totally right. Today we're testing a lot with combustion engines, but the ultimate goal will be to replace those by e-trucks. This is definitely what we're looking for. Two reasons in terms of how to steer the vehicles. This is going to be even easier because the electric vehicle, there's basically a 0 or a 1, and it's a lot easier to steer those. So there's less mechanical friction in the vehicle. In terms of what does it mean in terms of total cost of ownership? That's then the next step, because you know that we are trying to replace big scale our vehicles by e-vehicles, and that will be the next step also towards a reduced total cost of ownership approach, which then makes those vehicles attractive for the customers. Mm-hmm. And last not least, there's always, and we've been talking a lot of hub-to-hub and highway operations, but there are, of course, also operations where the electrified autonomous vehicle even brings a benefit to the customer even more, because it takes a lot of risk of combustion engines. Just take mining activities, for instance. I mean, we're not only talking salt mines, but we're also talking other mines where there's a lot of explosives around. And there also that is an improvement of safety and also then of cost again. Mm.
Great. So Thomas, you already named some of the projects that are running. Erik, from your perspective, is there one more to name, or which one you think was maybe most relevant for the development of autonomous driving?
Well, I think we have tested the limits in different ways. Thomas mentioned that we run already since 4 years in confined areas with a customer in Australia. We also already 3 years ago launched a concept vehicle, AXL, which is a mining truck totally without a cab, because it is fully autonomous and no need to have a driver at all in it. So that's testing the limits in another way. On partnership with our customers, I think it's worth mentioning that we are extending now our hub-to-hub activities on Swedish roads together with a customer of us, Harvey, and we are performing now commercial operation in level 4 autonomous driving, still though with a safety driver, but the vehicle is fully level 4 capable.
And then maybe to sum it up a bit, from your perspective, what do you criticize about the regulation in Europe at the moment? What still needs to be changed on the way to autonomous driving on everyday's roads?
Well, I think I wouldn't criticize anything, but of course there is more to wish. I think we should be humble enough to say that this is virgin ground also for the legislators. They need to learn during the journey, and we have, of course, a responsibility as an industry and with all our research capabilities to educate them. And we are still learning. So, but we can see that there are some parts of the existing legislation that need to be changed in the coming years. We need to, for example, remove the small serious limitations that I mentioned, that we can only approve a certain number of vehicles per year. There is also some, I would say, too much safety in the legislation, not when it comes to road safety, because that need to be top notch, but when it comes to which roads we can travel. So in the first legislation there, the vehicle need not only to be approved as such, but also need to be approved in combination with the intended road. And we know that the vehicle will be capable of identifying the road it has a capability of running on. So that is something that we need to take away from the legislation for the years to come. And a third thing to mention, we are developing most of the standards also not only within a country or within the EU, but in a UN perspective. So there we have the collected knowledge from all continents, and there we are developing harmonized legislation. And of course, in a couple of years, that is what we need. We need harmonized standards and regulations.
Yeah, thank you. I think now it's time to come to an end. And I would like to do this with a quote from Thomas Edison. The value of an idea lies in the using of it. So I wish all of you a great day and spark some great ideas.